The Moores were the kind of couple neighbors whispered about, not out of scandal, but envy. Their house sat at the corner of Oak Ridge Lane, draped in ivy and sunlight, the kind of place that made everything look softer, kinder. On the morning of their 10th anniversary, Daniel trimmed the rose bushes while Evelyn set the table for breakfast. From a distance, they looked like harmony itself, two people who'd found their rhythm and never lost it. But up close, the rhythm was off. Evelyn's smile lingered too long, the kind people practiced in mirrors. Her hand trembled as she poured orange juice into Daniel's glass. He noticed, though he said nothing, just reached for the glass, brushed her fingers, and watched her flinch. The moment passed like a shadow crossing a sunlit room. 10 years, Daniel said, forcing cheer. We made it, she nodded, her eyes glancing toward the clock instead of him. Yes, we did. Narration filled the silence between them, the kind of silence that holds more truth than words ever could. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant laughter of children outside. Evelyn's gaze lingered on the framed wedding photo on the wall, her white dress, his hand on her waist, a promise frozen in time. The woman in the photo looked nothing like her now. Daniel stood, adjusted his tie, and kissed the top of her head, mechanical, practiced. Dinner tonight? Don't be late. She watched him leave, his reflection fragmenting across the hallway mirror. When the door closed, Evelyn exhaled a sound that was half laugh, half sob. She pressed her fingers against her wrist, where faint bruises had not yet faded, and whispered, "Happy anniversary." The kettle whistled. The scent of roses mixed with burnt toast. She sat alone, listening to the echo of his car disappearing down the street. On the table, beside her untouched plate, lay a sealed envelope addressed in her handwriting.
Inside was a letter, short,
final, deliberate. Outside, the sun rose higher, wrapping the Moore house in light so golden, so deceitful. It almost looked peaceful, but behind that light, something was already breaking, something that would, by morning, make the world wonder whether love and cruelty had always shared the same face. Rain had fallen through the night, washing the world clean, or trying to. The Moore house sat silent under the bruised gray of dawn, its windows streaked with water, its front yard glittering with dew and neglect. Daniel stood by the kitchen counter, coffee cooling beside him, eyes fixed on the empty chair across the table. Evelyn's breakfast sat untouched, 2 slices of toast now stiff and curling at the edges. He told himself she'd gone for her usual jog. She always jogged after an argument. She said it cleared her head. But the clock above the stove blinked 9:17, and Evelyn had never been gone this long. He checked his phone again. No messages, just the rain, soft and rhythmic against the window. When the knock came, it startled him. Too soon, too sharp. Detective Nora Walsh introduced herself, polite but cautious. A neighbor had called the police after seeing Daniel searching the woods behind the subdivision before sunrise. He looked surprised, even offended, when she asked if Evelyn was missing. She went for a run, he said. She does this every morning. Walsh's gaze drifted over the counter, the neat stack of dishes, the folded napkin beside the untouched toast. And you didn't think it was odd she didn't take her phone? Or her shoes? Daniel blinked. She was upset last night. She needed space. The flashback came like a flicker of lightning, Evelyn's voice sharp and shaking. You can't keep pretending, Daniel. They'll find out what you did. He'd stood in the doorway, jaw tight. You don't know what you're talking about. Her laugh was brittle, broken. Oh, I do. And I'm done protecting you. Back in the present, Daniel's hands clenched around his mug. We argued, he admitted. Every couple does. Outside, yellow tape fluttered in the wind. Neighbors gathered in clusters, whispering, watching. A jogger's disappearance in a quiet neighborhood. The kind of story that spreads faster than truth. Detective Walsh noted everything. His calmness, the steadiness of his voice, the way his eyes darted not with grief but calculation. She excused herself to inspect the backyard. Daniel remained by the window, staring at the rain-soaked driveway where Evelyn's car still sat. He touched the ring on his finger, twisting it once, twice, then too many times. When he looked up, he caught his reflection in the glass. A face composed, unreadable. And behind that reflection, through the misted pane, something dark stirred in the corner of the yard. half buried by mud, glinting faintly in the weak light. It looked like the edge of a phone. Detective Nora Walsh had seen too many houses like this. Spotless, scented with vanilla candles trying too hard to smell like peace. She stood in the Moore's living room, rain dripping from her coat, her eyes tracing the framed smiles on the walls. Perfect couple, she thought. Perfect was always the first lie. The yard behind her still bore the chaos of the morning search. Muddy footprints, yellow tape, curious neighbors peering over hedges. The half-buried phone retrieved from the soil now sat in an evidence bag on the counter. Cracked, damp, but very real. Daniel claimed not to know how it got there. Walsh studied him carefully as he spoke. He had that kind of face. Symmetrical, polite, unreadable. His tone was calm, precise. Evelyn went jogging at 6. I was still asleep. When I woke up, she was gone. She nodded, jotting notes, letting silence do the work. Most people rushed to fill silence. Daniel didn't. His stillness unnerved her. Any arguments recently? She asked. He hesitated just long enough. No more than usual. That pause, small but heavy, told her more than his words. She glanced at the faint mark near his wrist. Circular, like a scrape that had tried to heal too quickly. After the initial questioning, Walsh returned to her car and opened her notebook. Pages of half-written thoughts filled the margins. Evidence sketches, gut reactions. Her instincts rarely failed her. Something in Daniel's story was off. She checked the report from the financial division. 2 mortgages, maxed-out credit cards, Evelyn's recent inquiry about separating accounts. The Moores weren't just a happy couple. They were drowning. In the glove compartment, she found the file from a previous domestic case. A woman gone missing after filing a restraining order. The husband had also appeared calm. Too calm, Walsh rubbed her temple. She knew that kind of calm. It was the silence that comes after the storm. The kind that hides what's already done. Later that evening, she visited Evelyn's workplace. A coworker mentioned Evelyn had seemed jumpy lately, always checking her phone, always watching the door. Another whispered, she said she was scared of him. Said she'd found something she shouldn't have. Walsh left the building with the first thread of truth tugging at her gut. Evelyn hadn't just run. She'd been running from something. As she pulled back into Oak Ridge Lane, dusk thickened around the Moore house. Daniel stood in the window watching her car headlights approach, his expression unreadable against the glass. Walsh wrote one final note before stepping out. Something's not right in that house. Tomorrow, she'd get a warrant. The warrant came through just after sunrise. Detective Walsh stood at the threshold of the Moore house once more. The same scent of vanilla candles trying to hide something sour beneath. Daniel watched from the porch, jaw tight, hands shoved into his pockets. His calmness hadn't cracked. Not yet. Routine follow-up, Walsh said evenly as her team entered. We just need to take another look. They moved through the house methodically. Bedroom, office, garage. Nothing. Everything too neat, too curated. Then in the hallway by the kitchen, Walsh noticed a section of floor that didn't match. Slightly raised. A faint scuff on the baseboard. She crouched, tapped the panel, hollow. Daniel's voice broke the quiet. That's just storage. Then you won't mind opening it. He hesitated, the first sign of discomfort since she'd met him. After a long pause, he fetched a small brass key from a drawer and handed it to her without a word. The hidden door opened to reveal a narrow staircase descending into shadow. The air grew colder with each step, heavy with the smell of dust and something older. Something forgotten. A single bulb flickered to life. The room was small, claustrophobic. Boxes lined the walls, meticulously labeled. Walsh's flashlight beam landed on photographs pinned to a corkboard. Evelyn at dinner, Evelyn reading, Evelyn asleep. Hundreds of them, all taken from angles that made her look unaware. Observed. Walsh's throat tightened. "What the hell is this?" she murmured. A shelf nearby held receipts. For flowers, expensive wine, a necklace. Each dated after one of the arguments Evelyn had written about in her journal. Apologies paid for, not earned. And then, the journal itself, leather-bound, frayed at the corners, Evelyn's looping handwriting across the first page. If anything happens to me, someone needs to know who Daniel really is. Walsh skimmed pages filled with descriptions of manipulation cloaked as affection. He makes me question my memory. He says I forget things that never happened. He watches me sleep. He says he'd rather destroy me than lose me. The entries stopped abruptly, dated 3 days before her disappearance. Walsh stared at the final line, underlined twice. Tomorrow. I'm telling the truth. Behind her, the door creaked. Daniel stood at the top of the stairs, his silhouette framed in dim light. "Detective," he said softly, voice steady but strange. "You shouldn't be down there alone." Walsh looked up slowly, her pulse sharp in her ears. "Then why?" she asked. "Does it feel like I am?" The knock came just before noon. Detective Walsh looked up from the journal still open on her desk. Evelyn's final line etched in her thoughts. At the door stood a gray-haired man clutching a USB stick like it might burn him. "I live across the street," he said. I didn't think it mattered before, but I have one of those home cameras. It faces their driveway." Walsh took the device, thanked him, and within minutes had it loaded in the evidence room. The footage flickered to life, grainy, washed in the orange glow of the previous night's storm. Daniel and Evelyn stood in the driveway, rain drumming against them like static. Their voices were faint at first, distorted by wind, until Evelyn's cut through, sharp and terrified. "Evelyn, you'll never control me again, Daniel. I'm done pretending. Daniel, you think anyone will believe you? After everything you've done? Evelyn, I don't care who believes me. I just want out." Lightning flashed. Evelyn turned toward the house, her face pale, eyes wide, not with fear but resolve. Daniel followed, his hand shooting out to grab her arm. The struggle lasted seconds, then the feed glitched. The image froze on Evelyn's mouth mid-scream and cut to black. Walsh leaned back, pulse steady but cold. Evidence, finally, and yet it felt incomplete. Something in Daniel's eyes during that frame, a mix of fury and heartbreak, unsettled her. By evening, Daniel was in the interrogation room. The mirrored glass separated him from Walsh's stare. He looked smaller now, his confidence stripped thin. She entered quietly, dropped a folder on the table and pressed play. The recording filled the room, Evelyn's voice echoing against sterile walls. Daniel's jaw clenched. "You don't understand what was happening that night." "Then help me understand," Walsh said, her tone flat but dangerous. "Because right now this looks like the beginning of a confession." He exhaled, slow and deliberate. "She was unstable. She'd been threatening to ruin me. That video doesn't show what she did inside the house. What did she do? She said she'd tell the police everything. Things that would destroy us both, lies. Lies about what?" Walsh leaned in. "The bruises? The hidden room? The journal that ends the day before she vanished?" His composure cracked, a flash of something raw and trembling underneath. "You think you know her?" he hissed. "She wasn't some saint. She lied, manipulated. She wanted me to break." Walsh stayed silent, watching him unravel. Finally, Daniel's voice softened, almost pleading. "You don't know what love makes you do." The room went quiet except for the faint hum of the air vent. Walsh shut the laptop. "Love doesn't make people disappear," she said. "Control does." Daniel's eyes flicked toward the dark corner of the room, as though searching for something or someone. Not there. Walsh rose, signaling the officer outside. "Hold him overnight. We're searching the lake house next." As she walked away, Daniel whispered under his breath, barely audible through the glass. "She's not gone, Detective. She's just waiting for you to find her." Detective Walsh found her waiting in the lobby, a woman with the same blue-gray eyes as Evelyn's, but sharper, weathered by distance and distrust. Claire Mason. She'd driven through the night after seeing the news report about her sister's disappearance. She wouldn't just run, Claire said before Walsh could even greet her. "Not Evelyn. Not unless she had a reason." Walsh nodded, motioning for her to sit. "We found signs of tension in the marriage. Financial issues. A history of control." Claire gave a bitter laugh. "Control? That's a soft word for what he did to her." As rain battered the station windows, Claire unfolded pieces of Evelyn's past like fragments of evidence themselves. 10 years ago, Daniel had been charming. The kind of man who made everyone feel small beside his confidence. Evelyn was the quiet one, always trying to please, but it hadn't lasted. "She told me once," Claire said, voice trembling, "that he made her choose him over everyone else." "Over me," After that, I stopped visiting." She exhaled, eyes unfocused. Then 3 years ago, she called crying. Said she'd lied to him. Told him she was pregnant so he'd stop threatening to leave. Walsh frowned. Pregnant? She wasn't. She thought it would buy her time. But when he found out, Claire's voice cracked. He threw a chair across the room. She said he swore if she ever lied again, he'd make sure no one believed a word she said. Walsh scribbled notes, each word cutting deeper. Did she ever mention being afraid for her life? Claire met her gaze. Every day. But Evelyn had this hope. She believed she could fix him. She said if she left, he'd destroy her. If she stayed, maybe she could control the damage. Silence lingered between them, thick as the rain outside. Then Claire leaned forward, her tone hardening. "Detective, I don't care what Daniel says. If Evelyn's gone." He did it. Walsh studied her, the raw grief, the certainty born from long years of watching someone unravel. But part of her hesitated. The case felt too layered, too scripted, as if someone had anticipated every revelation before it surfaced. Still, she promised, "We'll find the truth." When Claire left, Walsh sat alone with Evelyn's journal open beside the taped transcript of Daniel's interrogation. 2 voices, 2 stories, both claiming to be victims. Her phone buzzed. A text from the forensics team. "Something found near the lake house. You'll want to see this." Walsh grabbed her coat, heart steadying against the storm outside. The truth, it seemed, was waiting by the water. Fog hung over Lake Briar like a living thing, slow and deliberate, swallowing the shoreline. Detective Walsh stepped out of her car, boots sinking into the damp soil. The lake house stood before her. Weathered wood, boarded windows, and silence so complete it hummed. According to Evelyn's journal, this was where they'd spent their first anniversary. The entry had ended with a cryptic line. "If I disappear, start here." Walsh tightened her grip on the flashlight and approached. The door creaked open with the weight of years, and the air inside smelled of mold, metal, and memory. Dust floated through slants of weak light filtering from broken blinds. The house was stripped bare, except for the faint outline of a rug rolled to the side, revealing a dark stain beneath. She crouched. The edges were dry, but the center still tacky. Blood. "Get the tech team in here," she said into her radio. "We've got biological traces." As the forensics crew moved in, Walsh wandered deeper. Family photos, faded from sunlight, lined the hallway. Evelyn laughing, Daniel beside her, his hand always on her shoulder. In every frame, his smile reached his mouth, but never his eyes. She found herself staring at one particular picture. Evelyn by the lake, her reflection rippling below. For a second, Walsh could almost imagine Evelyn watching her now, from that dark mirror of water. "Detective?" A forensics officer's voice broke through the quiet. "You should see this." In the fireplace lay remnants of burned paper, half-letters, receipts, a charred piece of cloth that might have been part of a dress. One scrap still bore Evelyn's handwriting. He said it would be cleaner this way. Walsh's pulse tightened. She turned to the window, where Daniel's alibi was about to collapse. He'd claimed he hadn't been here in years, but a fresh receipt found in the kitchen trash, dated 2 nights ago, told a different story. Back at the station, under the harsh white light of interrogation, Daniel's composure fractured. "You think I killed her because of some stain on the floor," he snapped. "You don't know Evelyn. She planned everything, even her own vanishing act." Walsh kept her voice level. "Then why lie about being at the lake house?" He hesitated. "Because she made me promise never to go back. It was sacred to her." "She wrote that it was hell," Walsh countered. "You called it sacred." Daniel's eyes darkened. "You're reading her lies like scripture." For a moment, silence filled the room. 2 people circling a truth neither could claim. Later that night, alone in her car by the water's edge, Walsh replayed the recording of his words, his voice breaking between denial and devotion. The fog drifted low across the lake, blurring the horizon. Something felt off, too deliberate, too orchestrated, as she watched the still surface. A reflection rippled. Not hers. A faint shimmer of movement beneath the water. Walsh's breath caught. If Evelyn had wanted to disappear, she might have chosen the perfect place. The rain hadn't stopped for days. It fell like static over the investigation, blurring everything into shades of gray. Truth, lies, guilt. Detective Walsh sat at her desk, eyes fixed on Evelyn's journal. Between lists of arguments and fragments of despair, one line stood out now more than ever. Jonas understands me. He knows how to make it stop. Jonas, a name that hadn't appeared in any of Daniel's interviews. Walsh leaned forward, scrolling through Evelyn's phone records retrieved from the cloud. A burner number appeared repeatedly in the weeks before her disappearance. Late-night calls, text messages that started brief and became intimate. When traced, the registration name froze her breath. Evelyn Moore. The burner phone was hers. The first message Walsh recovered read, "It's almost time. I can't live like this anymore." Another followed. "He'll never let me go unless he thinks I'm dead." Walsh felt a pulse of unease. If Evelyn had staged her disappearance, the pieces were all in place. The argument, the journal, the blood. Too perfect. Too cinematic. She visited Claire again to verify the name. Claire frowned, thinking, Jonas. No, she never mentioned anyone. Evelyn didn't have friends left, Detective. Daniel made sure of that. Maybe not friends, Walsh murmured, but someone she trusted enough to vanish with. That evening, Walsh drove back toward the lake house. The fog rolled across the road in thick ribbons, her headlights slicing through it like blades. The silence pressed against the windows. When she parked, her radio crackled. Detective, we just pulled a voicemail from the recovered data. Timestamp, night of disappearance. Walsh pressed play. Evelyn's voice filled the car, fragile but resolute. Velin, Jonas, it's done. He thinks I'm gone. If anyone asks, you don't exist. Not yet. A long pause, then static. Walsh's stomach turned. Evelyn had orchestrated this. The question was, well, why? To escape Daniel? To destroy him? Or to prove something darker? She stepped outside, the lake rippling under the dull moonlight. Every reflection distorted itself. The water seemed to hide faces, whispers, the weight of what she didn't know. If Evelyn had run, she hadn't run alone. Back at headquarters, Daniel's lawyer demanded his release due to lack of physical evidence. As Daniel walked free, he passed Walsh in the corridor. Their eyes met briefly, his calm restored, almost mocking. You look tired, Detective, he said softly. Maybe you should stop chasing ghosts. Walsh didn't reply. She only watched him leave, her mind caught between two possibilities, that Evelyn Moore was dead, or that she had written the script everyone else was still acting in. Outside, her phone buzzed. A new message from an unlisted number. You're closer than you think. Stop digging. The call came just after dawn. A hiker had found something near the edge of Briar Woods, a shallow grave disturbed by rain and roots. Detective Walsh arrived to the sound of crows and sirens, the forest thick with mist and decay. Officers had cordoned off the site. A single pale hand jutted from the mud, fingers stiff, a wedding band dull beneath the dirt. For a moment, Walsh stood still, listening to the silence that followed discovery. It wasn't relief she felt, it was unease. The story, she knew, was far from over. The forensic team worked quickly. The body was recovered, wrapped in a torn bedsheet that smelled faintly of lake water and smoke. Evelyn Moore. The confirmation came from dental records within hours, though Walsh had known the moment she saw the curve of the hand. What unsettled her was not that Evelyn was dead, but how she'd been found, miles from where Daniel said she vanished, miles from where the evidence had pointed, back at the lab. The autopsy report brought more questions than closure. No broken bones, no blunt trauma, no defensive wounds. Cause of death, acute poisoning. The toxin, a rare synthetic compound derived from sedatives, had been ingested in a lethal dose. Time of death, approximately 2 nights after her disappearance. Walsh stared at the report, her pulse tightening. Evelyn hadn't been killed in rage. She'd been dying slowly, silently, and she'd taken it willingly. But the shock came hours later, when hospital results from Daniel's overnight detainment returned. The same toxin, minute traces in his bloodstream, not enough to kill him immediately, but enough to make him sick, confused, erratic. Walsh gripped the edge of her desk, her mind racing. Had they poisoned each other? Or had Evelyn, in her final act, ensured their deaths would be entwined? One body found, the other soul condemned. She replayed Evelyn's final voicemail in her head. He thinks I'm gone. If anyone asks, you don't exist. Maybe Jonas had never existed. Maybe he was a creation, a voice Evelyn needed to write herself out of the marriage, to give her plan form. When Walsh visited Daniel in the hospital, he looked pale, trembling, eyes hollow. She did this, he whispered. Said we'd finally be free. I thought she meant from the lies. Walsh said nothing. Through the window, the forest swayed under a gray sky, endless and quiet. If this was freedom, it was the cruelest kind. Outside, her phone buzzed again. Another message from the unlisted number. This time, just a single line. She wanted you to find her. Walsh's gaze lifted toward the woods beyond the parking lot. Dark, patient, still holding secrets. The letter arrived 2 days after Evelyn's body was buried. A clerk from the local bank called Detective Walsh, saying a safety deposit box under Evelyn Moore's name had just been released for posthumous access. Evelyn had left instructions, one envelope addressed to whoever finds the truth. Walsh sat alone in the dim light of the evidence room, the envelope before her. It was ivory, edges yellowed. Evelyn's looping script steady but deliberate. No tremor, no hesitation. She slid it open carefully, the scent of old paper and perfume escaping like memory. If you are reading this, the letter began, then one of us is dead. Maybe both. But understand this, it was never about revenge. It was about ending the noise. Evelyn's words unfolded like confession and indictment in one. She wrote of 10 years of control disguised as love. The daily corrections, the soft cruelties, the way Daniel could make her doubt her own reflection. He told me I couldn't survive without him, so I decided to prove him right, by taking us both down. Walsh's eyes traced the next line, cold and final. I poisoned his wine. A single glass during our anniversary dinner. I wanted him to feel the fear I lived with every day, the waiting for something unseen to destroy you. But Evelyn hadn't foreseen what came next. He found the bottle, she wrote. He knew. And that night, while I slept, he poured me a glass instead. In the morning, he asked me to toast to 10 years. I watched him drink mine, smiling. He wanted me to live long enough to see what I'd done. The words wavered then, handwriting faltering for the first time. I switched the glasses back. I couldn't let him win, not even in death. When he drank, I knew I was drinking too. Was the only way to make it even. Love, justice. They taste the same when they kill you. By the end, the ink had smudged with water. Tears, perhaps, or something spilled in haste. Walsh folded the letter slowly, her throat tight. She thought of Daniel's last words in the hospital. She did this so we'd be free. Free or finished. Outside, the wind rattled against the window, carrying the faint scent of rain. Walsh slipped the letter into an evidence bag and stared at her reflection in the glass. One face divided, light and shadow. Love had been their weapon. Truth, their undoing. And now all that remained was the story, too twisted, too perfect to ever feel real. The story of Daniel and Evelyn Moore did not end with truth. It ended with disbelief. By the time the media caught wind of it, both were gone, their bodies claimed by the same poison that bound their marriage tighter than vows ever could. The report read like fiction. Husband and wife found dead within hours of each other. Possible murder-suicide or mutual pact. Detective Nora Walsh stood before the lake house one final time, fog curling around her like memory. The investigation was technically closed, the evidence neatly catalogued, the story labeled. Yet none of it felt complete. Not the toxicology reports, not Evelyn's letter, not Daniel's final whisper from the hospital bed. She wanted us to end together. Walsh narrated the case in her report like she was watching someone else's tragedy unfold, an episode of a show she couldn't turn off. No one could tell, she wrote, where love ended and cruelty began. The footage played endlessly on late-night documentaries. Journalists pieced together fragments of video, grainy photos, and staged reenactments, each trying to answer what even the detectives couldn't. Was Evelyn a victim or an architect? Was Daniel the abuser? Or the final sacrifice in a game of mirrored guilt? In one scene, Evelyn's smiling wedding portrait faded into the morgue photo, beauty dissolving into stillness. Another showed Daniel's interview clip, his voice calm, eyes full of something that wasn't quite remorse and wasn't quite rage. Viewers debated endlessly online. The more mystery trended for weeks. Walsh, meanwhile, avoided the interviews and the lights. She spent her nights replaying every word, every expression, every piece of evidence that had once seemed to make sense. The basement photographs, the letter, the poison, the missing glass. It all formed a perfect circle. Too perfect. In the quiet of her apartment, she poured herself a glass of wine and watched the lake house footage again, the crime scene camera drifting through empty rooms. The table was still set for two glasses, two ghosts. The narrator's voice from the televised special bled through her thoughts. Some stories don't end, they echo. Walsh closed her eyes. She thought about Evelyn's line. Love, justice, they taste the same when they kill you. Maybe that was the point. Maybe they'd both wanted to prove it. A knock startled her. When she opened the door, no one was there. Just an envelope lying on the floor. No return address. Inside was a photograph. Evelyn and Daniel at the lake house, smiling, alive. The back read in looping script, "Not everything you bury stays buried." Walsh's breath caught. Outside, thunder rolled low over the lake. The world for a moment felt tilted again. Off balance, unreal. She looked toward the window where her reflection merged with the night beyond. One face divided by glass. Maybe that's why detectives doubted it was real. Because the truth wasn't meant to be solved, only survived. And somewhere in the static hum of the rain, the voice of the narrator returned, soft and final. In the end, they weren't victims or monsters. Just two people who mistook destruction for devotion.